Hello, there's a 1975 Chevrolet in the parking lot with the lights on. 1975 Chevrolet with the lights on in the parking lot. I'm kidding. I'm very honored and pleased to introduce our keynote speaker today. She's full of accomplishments, according to her bio: an attorney, engineer, author, writer, inspirational speaker. And I think that the message that she has is one that we really need to hear. Before I got here and after I got here, I've been involved in so many conversations about people who were fearful and anxious about coming to this event. And I'm asking you to look around and see, who were you afraid of? Who? There's nobody here that wants to hurt you or judge you, and that state of fearfulness, of low self-esteem, is something that's a choice. It's an internal choice. And I believe that Karen Walrond has a message for us that is going to hopefully help us with that. And on the shuttle today, I was talking to someone named Cindy, not my writing partner Cindy, but yet another Cindy, go figure. And we were talking about what we were doing today, and I said that I had the privilege to introduce the keynote speaker at the luncheon. And the woman who drove the shuttle said, "Is that woman from Texas?" And I go, yes, she is from Texas. And she said, "She's wonderful. I gave her a ride. I wish that I could come to the luncheon and hear her speak." So Karen Walrond is someone who talks the talk and walks the walk. And I'm so pleased that she's here. Let's hear her talk. Karen Walrond.
Oh my God. No pressure, right? Let's all just take a moment and lower our expectations a little bit. I am beyond thrilled to be here. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. This is actually my third Erma Bombeck Writers Workshop. So I'm not a virgin. I saw that there's stickers, is that right? That somebody's walking around, "I'm a virgin." I'm like, right on, right? So I'm thrilled to be here, and the honor of keynoting is fantastic. So thank you guys so much. So when I was asked to be here, the organizers, I said, what do you want me to talk about? And they said, "Oh, you can talk about whatever you want." So immediately my mind turned to attempted murders and natural disasters, because why not? As it turns out, both of these things have led me to discover an uncomfortable truth about myself. And whenever I get uncomfortable, I feel compelled to share that discomfort. So lucky you. You're welcome. Okay, so late one evening last month, I officially gave up. I decided I had enough of humans and humanity and people in general. And to announce my complete and utter concession from life, as most modern folk do, I tweeted. And so this is what I tweeted. You probably can't read it, but it says, "If anyone ever asks you when the moment was that I lost all faith in humanity, tell them it was at 11:42 p.m. on Thursday, March 15th, when I read this article. I give up." Okay, so before I continue, I am not going to be just talking about gore and horror today. I want to preface everything I'm about to tell you that everybody in this story survives. Everybody is going to be fine. I'm not that bad. But in case you missed this Washington Post article, it starts out pretty innocuously. Emily Javier suspected her boyfriend, Alex Lovell, of cheating on her, and she got angry. And that's when things went sideways. Because to get back at him, she decided to go to her local mall and purchase not locks to change the locks and keep him out of the house forever, but instead a samurai sword. Yeah, apparently Oregon malls have more exotic weapons than malls back in Texas do. So it seems that Emily was frustrated with her boyfriend for staying constantly glued to his video games, Not to mention that in the previous weeks, she had begun to develop strong suspicions that he was unfaithful. So, naturally, she thought to herself, I'm gonna stab him while he's sleeping. So on March 2nd, when Alex came home and ignored her yet again to play his games, she allegedly decided to go through with the attack, taping the sword and 2 knives to the side of the bed, and when he finally went to sleep, my girl reached for the sword. All right, so you get the story. Boy meets girl, boy cheats on girl, girl goes to the mall, gets a samurai sword, and starts hacking at him in the middle of the night while he's sleeping. Now, on its own, this is a pretty sad story, right? Like, Emily is clearly in a lot of pain if she feels compelled to go after her boyfriend with a sword. And normally, I would have just clicked away from the article and shaken my head at the tragedy and moved on. But this story doesn't end here. So, my girl's hacking at him, and he wakes up, and he's presumably stunned that his girlfriend has gone buck wild. And here's what the article says. Quote, survival instincts, mainly martial arts training, and all the kung fu films he watched clicked in. Y'all got that, right? The kung fu films he watched saved his life. All right. It continues. I was able to Wing Chun my way to survival, he told the Oregonian, referring to a Chinese martial art that I totally thought was made up, but is actually a thing. And he said, I saw the look in her eyes, and it scared the living poop out of me. So, my boy Alex grabs Emily in a bear hug, and he talks her into calling the police, which she did. And when they arrive, they find him huddled in a blood-stained corner. He's got 3 fingers just about hacked off, but thankfully, they got him to a hospital. They were able to reattach his fingers, okay? So that's good. And this is the part in the article where we find out more about our hapless victim. Because apparently, the emotion that this experience has left him with is not grief, not horror, but overwhelmingly one of pride. Quote, I was just so proud for beating this samurai wannabe crazy lady with hate in her heart, the 29-year-old told the Oregonian, and he said, I've been preparing my whole life for something like this. Okay? The article keeps going. Alex Lovell, AKA Biggie to his gamer friends, had been recently logging 12 to 13 hours a day playing his video games. The regimen also required exercises for his hands, wrists, and shoulders, and also practicing mouse moves and techniques to maximize performance. And here's my favorite part. I wasn't a sweaty nerd, he said, more of an athlete. Electronic athlete, okay? And the article ends with this gem. The feeling I had when I won the fight with my bare hands is just absolutely the best feeling, he boasted from the hospital. I've played all the sports, won big games, landed some decent tricks on my snowboard. This was better. I imagine so. Okay, so you're all laughing, but late that night, after a long day of scores of sensational news breaking online and cranky Facebook commenters and difficult phone calls and one particularly snotty barista, that article left me pissed. Like, dude, your girlfriend tried to kill you and you're proud, right? You've been preparing your whole life for something like this? I tell you what you should be doing, you should be re-examining your whole life. And I went off. I ranted to my husband, I ranted online, I went to bed, I woke up the next morning, I was angry, I was just mad. And I'm banging around coffee mugs in the morning, I'm like, oh, you gonna Wing Chun your way to survival, are you? And I was just angry. And my daughter comes into the kitchen and she's like, rubbing her sleepy eyes, and she's about to ask what the commotion is all about, when my husband glares at her and shakes his head in warning. I'm like, athlete, right? So my daughter's eyes grow really big with concern, and then she kind of nods to her dad, like, I get what you're saying, and backs out, and my husband slowly follows her out of the room. And I'm still banging stuff around, and 30 minutes later, I finally stumble into the shower, and I'm still angry, by the way, E-Fleet, come on. When suddenly, it uncomfortably dawns on me, I might be Alex Lovell. I might be a Wing Chun master. See, I live in Houston, Texas, and some of you might recall this past summer, we had a little storm that wreaked a little bit of havoc in our town. All right, now to be clear, Houston is no stranger to flooding. We are a flooding city. In the last few years, we've had a couple of severe floods where people lost their homes, and those were just from unusually enthusiastic rainstorms, not hurricanes. So when it became apparent that Hurricane Harvey was going to be making landfall about 150 miles south of us, we knew it was going to be a major rain event, but we were told it wasn't going to be a big wind event. And so Houstonians, we didn't even consider evacuating, right? Like, this wasn't our first rodeo. We've been here before. So we went to the stores and we bought the necessities of life, like steaks and wine and beer and chips, right? And we prepared to hunker down and just kind of wait for the few days until the street flooding receded. In fact, I didn't even let to the fact that I'd let our flood insurance lapse 2 years earlier, a couple of, yeah. Y'all understand foreshadowing, don't you? Writers, yeah. Because even in those previous flood incidents, our neighborhood was dry. We don't live in a flood zone. So Harvey makes landfall. And then the next day, the storm, which has now been weakened, turns, and it starts to make its way toward Houston. So now friends from outside the city are watching, and they're fretting and freaking out, and I took to Facebook, and I was assuring them that whatever they were seeing on their television screens was completely far away from us. We're fine. I said, I'm drinking wine. Marcus has got his whiskey. We're good. We're great. But the water kept coming. So, so I don't know if you can see that, but that's my front lawn. So you know what's wild about floodwater? It doesn't just come into your house under the doors. It turns out that it also seeps up through the floorboards. So you're standing in your house, watching the rain outside, and suddenly there's a puddle that forms in your living room. And as Marcus and I stood in our house, the water beginning to lap around our ankles, we looked around in alarm, and then we looked at each other, and then we started laughing. Because apparently, when a crisis becomes too incomprehensible, my husband and I turn to humor. Because what else could we do, really, right? Like, we stopped to take pictures. We took pictures of my husband standing out in our front garden. My husband, by the way, is 6'5", grinning like a goon, the water's reaching his thighs, right? So we're not crazy, so we thought, okay, we gotta get our daughter out. So we got our daughter evacuated to her best friend's home pretty quickly, but we decided to kind of stay, to kind of monitor the situation. And the next day, when it was apparent that we really needed to leave, 3 volunteer bass fishermen appeared out of nowhere, miraculously, chugging their boat down our street to get us out. That's one of them, bless his heart, and those are the other 2. And they gave us a ride, and we were so grateful to them for giving us a ride, we offered the money, right? We said, my husband was like, take the money. He insisted it. He was like, just take it for beer. And they kept shaking their heads, no, man, we're good. We don't need the money, we're good. And me, probably in shock, just finally couldn't help myself, and I screeched. I'm like, you can use the money for hookers and blow. And they were silent, as was my husband. Although he kind of expects that sort of thing from me at this point. But I kept going. I was like, seriously, you guys are angels. Like, you've officially earned your place in heaven. You don't have to be good anymore. Like, take the money, live a little, like, go. And they finally started laughing, and they collapsed in laughter. They never took our money. But after having shuttled people in the rain all morning long, I'm sure it felt good for them to laugh. And frankly, it felt pretty good to make them laugh. And when it came to our friends, Marcus and I kept insisting to them that we were fine, trying to convince them that despite everything, everything was going to be okay. But one of them sent us this notepad along with all the supplies and necessities that she knew we were going to need to clear up. And I don't know if you can see it, but everything is fine. I'm so glad you all laughed. Some people were like, I can't believe she sent that to you. But I laughed, and I was so grateful to her that she understood that we needed to laugh, especially in those early days, because we needed it to cope. Eventually, our family was all safe and dry together again, and it became clear that we had lost everything. Our home and all of our furniture and our clothes were gone, lost to the filthy water that had ended up taking residence in our house for almost 2 weeks. And as I often do to help process what I'm feeling, I turned to writing. And I wrote about the angels in the bass boat that I tried to pressure into behaving badly. And I also wrote about the dozens of total, complete strangers who showed up in the weeks that followed to help us clean out our home, including one guy that's in front of our house, that's the dumpster with most of our belongings in it, behind it. And there was one guy who had driven all the way in from New Orleans that morning. He said, "You Houstonians were so good to us during Katrina. Driving in was the very least I could do." And then, when he finished helping us remove drywall and move our filthy clothing and furniture to the curb to be taken away, since all the hotels in town were filled with displaced Houstonians, he just got in his car and drove the 5 hours back to New Orleans that night. And I never even got his name. Writing about this experience, both online and eventually for PBS NewsHour, because apparently they were unfazed by my hookers and blow comment, helped me really see so much of the beauty and the kindness around us in those days immediately following Hurricane Harvey. And it allowed me to share that loveliness with the outside world, who were likely only seeing a part of the truth, the devastation. The result is that even though I wouldn't wish what we experienced on my worst enemy, I actually remember that time with a considerable amount of fondness. And like Alex Lovell, my fondness might sound a little crazy to outsiders. But sometimes when we're dealing with unspeakable horror, focusing on the good wherever we can find it is how we make it through. So the truth is inescapable. Je suis Alex, right? Which brings me, I'm sure some of you are thinking, to my final story and to my point. So several years ago, I was invited to be the keynote, the closing keynote at a leadership conference at Stephen F. Austin State University in Texas for their business students. And the theme of the conference was "Be the Change," based on the Mahatma Gandhi quote, "Be the change that you wish to see in the world." It was, of course, an honor to be there, but it was particularly an honor because the lunchtime keynote was Arun Gandhi, who is the grandson of the Mahatma Gandhi. So the story of Mr. Gandhi, he grew up in apartheid South Africa. And apparently, when he was a little boy, did somebody just whoop about South Africa? Do we have a South African? Sorry? Oh, sneezing. Oh, bless you. Sorry. Maybe we had a South African with us. So Arun is growing up in apartheid South Africa. I was hoping it was that and not the whooping of the apartheid. But when he was a little boy, he was constantly getting into fights, right? Because black kids didn't like him because he wasn't really black, and white kids didn't like him because he clearly wasn't white. And so he was constantly getting in fights. And because he was getting in all these fights, his parents decided, finally, to send him back to India to live with his grandfather, who was just rising to the height of his prominence and popularity. And right, a quick aside, right? Like, would that we all could send our belligerent children to Grandpa Gandhi when they were getting a little out of hand, right? Anyway, so Arun goes to sit at the knee of his grandfather, and his work today continues the concepts of peace and nonviolence that his grandfather taught him. So the morning of the conference, it's the morning of this conference, and I was checking out of the hotel to go over to the university for the day, and Mr. Gandhi was sitting in the lobby having a cup of tea. And our eyes met, and I smiled at him, and he must have recognized me from the conference marketing materials because he smiled back and he said, "You may join me." So here's a pro tip. If any member of Mahatma Gandhi's family invites you to have a cup of tea with them, you just go do that. So I rushed to grab a cup of tea, and I sat with him and peppered him with all sorts of questions that I'm sure he hears all the time and is probably sick of answering, but he was very, very gracious. And it remains one of the most amazing moments of my life. But one of the things he told me that stuck with me, and he ended up sharing this with the students later that day, was his grandfather's concept of trusteeship. And what his grandfather said and what he said was that we all have talents and we have gifts and we have skills, but we mistakenly get our egos tied up in them, right? That we think we own these gifts, that they are the measure of our worthiness in the world. But the Mahatma actually believed that these skills and these talents and these gifts are given to us only in trusteeship by the universe or God or Allah or whoever. And we're supposed to just hold them and use them to make the world better and brighter and more connected. This, Mr. Gandhi says, is the meaning of life. Which brings me to you. Those of you who are in here who write, you who have the gift of writing, who share your stories of life, and you do so with humor, you literally create magic. You literally create light. Your writing gives perspective, and through your humor and your art, you create connection that in this increasingly fragmented world is so desperately needed to save us all. Your writing allows space for compassion, and I think compassion is actually the secret sauce to making the world a better place. It's what motivates friends of mine to send me funny notepads when I need it, or 3 young bass fishermen to go out in tropical storm weather to help total strangers, or even propel me to understand the seemingly maniacal pride behind a 12 to 13-hour per day gamer with apparent Wing Chun skills. Compassion is everything. So, please, 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 and another please, do not measure your success by awards or publications in prestigious journals, or even traffic to your humor blog. Even if those things never come, never give up writing. When you share your thoughts and your words, and you do so with humor and even laughter, you are changing lives, even if you never actually see the results. Your readers, they're taking your thoughts with them as they go through their days, and it's helping them process the insanity that the world throws at them. So know that as long as you continue writing and sharing and providing perspective, you are changing the world for the better. Really, really. And by the way, as far as I know, Emily is going to go to jail. Alex is going to heal, and hopefully his mouse exercises will help him regain total mobility in his gaming hand. And my family and I, we're rebuilding our home, this time 2 feet higher, and with a 2nd story. Everything really is fine. Thank you very much. Thank you guys so much. Oh, thank you. Oh, come on, sit down. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Sit, sit, sit. Sit. So I was quick today, but I think we get to open up everything for questions. Does that sound right to organizers? Yeah? And I'm told that there might be mics around. There's a couple of mic runners. Mic runners, raise your hand. So if you guys have any questions, I will. Yes, I will. There's one right up here in front, right here. I'm happy to answer any questions about anything at all. So, there's water right here. Hang on.
Hi.
Hi.
I was talking to somebody earlier, and they said you weren't funny. And who was that? Oh, that was you. So I'm wondering if Erma Nation changed your mind. Are you convinced you're funny now?
I'm convinced that everybody's as kind as they always are when I come here.
You're funny.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Ooh, there's one question over here. Yeah, that's good.
Hi, that was amazing.
Oh, thank you.
This is kind of a technical question.
Oh, God, okay.
But you mentioned that you had forgotten to renew your flood insurance.
Yeah.
So I was just wanting to follow up
That
on
is what you got out of this thing?
I have to know.
So what was the question? Have I renewed it?
No, just how that worked out with rebuilding your house.
Oh, okay. I have not yet renewed it because no house. Not yet, but I will. I could move to the Sahara, and I will have flood insurance from now on. I don't care. Yeah. Our regular homeowners insurance, because apparently we have something called French drains, I don't know what that is, said that they would give us $5,000, which, you know, is better than a poke in the eye. And FEMA actually came through for us, and we ended up getting, you know, enough to demolish the house, basically, right? Which is fine. But we took out a loan, so we are rebuilding, and we'll be eating hot dogs. We'll be living in a beautiful empty home for a little while, but we're okay. I mean, you know, here's the thing, like, a lot of friends, I have a couple of friends here who were going through this with me on Facebook when it was happening. I then and now I never got to anger. I have had a couple of moments of grief, but not really. Mostly because I consider us incredibly lucky, right? Our neighborhood had, you know, there were some elderly people who were retired, who didn't have any income coming in, who didn't have flood insurance, right? We heard stories of people being evacuated who were on oxygen. You know, people who were diabetic and they couldn't keep their insulin cold. Like, the three of us are healthy, we work, we have income coming in. Like, you know, I mean, it sucks. You know, I'm not saying that oh, yay, we lost our house. Like, I'm not that, right? But I think that in the long run, we have been really lucky. If you saw the truckloads, literally truckloads of supplies and things, guitar picks for my daughter who plays the guitar, and art supplies because my husband is an artist, and all this other stuff that friends just sent. Like, they didn't even wait for us, they just sent. And we realized how really wealthy we were when it came to love and friendship and stuff. So I literally, I know it sounds crazy, but I don't have a whole lot of anger or grief around it at all.
You handle that beautifully. Do you have a recommendation for where we could go to help?
For the flood victims?
Yeah,
you know, that's a really good idea. A good question, because, you know, now people kind of have forgotten. And even Houstonians have forgotten, because there are pockets of the city that look perfectly normal, and then you turn like down our street, and there's still ruined houses, and, you know, right now our street is full of empty lots, right? Because people are demoing. Our house just came down this week. The people who helped a lot were, interestingly, the churches were very, very active, and all churches of all denominations, and synagogues and things. So I would probably recommend contacting, you know, them and seeing, you know, we got this huge Easter, I mean, it was 7 months ago, and I got this giant Easter Baptist from the church that we attend with all this stuff in it, and I was like, seriously, give this to somebody else. And they said, you know, the problem is people keep sending us money for this, right? And so we need to do this. And they kind of know that in their own communities who needs and what they need. So that would actually probably be my first thing. The other thing, I'm sorry, I will move on to another question in a minute. The other thing, I have a very good friend who actually opened a distribution center during those days. She ended up, like, in 4 days, like, distributing 100,000 goods to the surrounding area. She was amazing. And her site was called The Giving Hub. She doesn't have it anymore, but she has lists of organizations that also help. So if you want to go to The Giving Hub, I think it's thegivinghub.com, you can also see a list. So thank you for asking that. That's lovely that you did. Thank you. Any more questions?
Karen?
Where am I?
Hi, Karen.
Oh, hi. Oh, it's so good to see you.
It's great to see you. You know, you drawing a similarity between you and Mr. Win Chung.
Yeah, bless him. Yeah.
Was not obvious to me, but it became very deep later on when I realized what you were talking about. And so I'm curious about your process where you draw from your introspection and your reflection. How do you stay in touch with that? Because I know that kind of mindset really informs our writing. So what's your process? Do you meditate? Is it through your photography that you keep that kind of deep, insightful mindset?
Yeah. My deepness is just a gift. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. I'm joking. Thank you. That's very sweet of you to say. You know, I wasn't joking about the fact that I was angry, and I went into the shower angry, and it was sort of like, why am I so angry about this guy? Like, I'm never going to see him. And it suddenly, like, kind of dawned on me. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm sure my friends look at me this way about the flood, right? Because I was like, we're good, we're fine. Like, literally, people, a very dear friend of mine, the one who gave me the notepad, she got angry with me and was like, Karen, you have to let your friends help you. Like, you have to. And it just, for some reason, that I thought of that, that conversation, I was like, oh man, you know, that's probably what I said. And that's probably why he's, like, proud. I mean, I don't know, you know, Alex doesn't strike me as that deep of a guy, but it could be that, that's what he was doing, right? Like, you know, he's sort of clinging to, this is what, because my life just got so incredibly crazy, this is what I need to do. I am a photographer, and I do shoot a lot, and that helps a lot. I also am a huge practitioner of gratitude. I think of something that I'm grateful for every single day, because I went through a particularly emotional time in my 20s, which was 20-something years ago, and I've never not done that. And so maybe that helps, because I do spend every night thinking what good happened to me today. It certainly saved my bacon during the flood. The fact that I could continue to do that even during those really tough days made it hopeful, right? Like, well, if I can still, you know, if I'm, you know, thigh deep in water and filthy sewage water and I can still think of something, then all cannot be lost, right? So I think probably that helps. You know, I don't know that I have a process. I mean, that sounds a lot more lofty than I do, but I am a very grateful person, and I do that intentionally. So thank you for the answer. Wait, is there one over there? Yes? Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
One of my favorite Erma quotes is, if you can't make it better, you can laugh at it. And I wonder if in that instant when you said you were standing in the water in your home and you laughed, if there isn't some part of knowing you're a writer, you're a creative person, and this will make a great story. To help others.
Yeah, I wish I was that insightful in that moment. I wasn't. As a matter of fact, I think I was telling somebody earlier today, just today, that I make my living doing speaking. I do a lot of speaking for corporations, and you know, I'm a lawyer, so I speak a lot to legal organizations, and I had not even considered talking about the flood until recently. I was like, oh, there's probably something there. like I probably learned something from that experience. But yeah, in the moment I didn't. It literally was, what else are we gonna do? Like, I remember my husband, so in the weeks the water was still in the house, he would go back in and save things, right? Like, he'd go in and then he'd get my desktop computer and bring it out, and you know, he'd come, I'm sure, you know, thank God he's white, because if my black ass did it, I would have been, right? They would have called it looting, right? So he was going in and getting art and coming out with it, and all kinds of stuff. And I remember him going in, and we had a coffee table, long gone now, that was floating in the house, and there was a frog, like, just kind of, and I mean, we just thought that was the funniest thing. Like, we spent like 50 minutes, like, he was just sitting there on the coffee table, right? Because, you know, what are you gonna do? And so it was much more about just kind of feeling hopeless. So what else could we do? The insights about it didn't come till months later, for sure. For sure. I see a few right here in front. Yeah.
You talked about the end, how as humorists and as writers, it's magic. Yeah. But you talked about at the beginning how it was a story that made you want to
kill him.
Yeah. So help us as humorists, as when you're wading out there in all of that sensationalist stuff, how do we find that distinction within ourselves, and when we're wading through all of that crapola?
Yeah, muck.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I will tell you.
Malarkey, isn't that the word? Yeah.
Yeah, malarkey. I have to say that when I read that article, even though I was sort of angry by the article, at the same time I was really sort of marveling at the author of the article. I wish I could remember the name of the guy, the columnist or the reporter who wrote it, because it was clearly, like, he didn't have to tell us about Wing Chun, right? Like, that was not necessarily a newsworthy thing. And so there was something about me that was sort of marveling that he was clearly, like, trying to show the ridiculousness of this, even while he's reporting. I mean, this is Washington Post. This wasn't like, you know, some fly-by-night organization. And I think that I found it very, because it would have been very easy for him to fall into mockery, right? Which he couldn't have done as a reporter, and you don't really want to do, because, you know, there but for the grace of God, go all of us, right? But clearly this guy, I mean, I'd love to meet him, because you know this guy's a funny guy. Like, you know he had to have some humor about it. So I don't know, I mean, I think if you're a humor writer, I have to think, and I'm not a humor writer, but I have to think that when you are a humor writer, you kind of have a gift of being able to see the ridiculousness of things. And I guess my point is, like, don't shy away from that. Like, and at the same time, remember kindness, right? I think that's really important. And I think that that's where a lot of people sort of go off the rails, is they get to meanness, which I am definitely not about, and I don't write that way. And I hope it didn't come across as mean when I told the story, because I don't mean it to be mean. I really do sort of resonate with Alex in that regard. And so, and poor Emily, like, I mean, a samurai sword, right? Like, that's a little extreme. Like she's in some pain. So, you know, there is some empathy there. And I think if we lead with empathy and lead with light, and then employ that gift of humor, I think you won't go wrong. But I think you have to be sort of grounded in those two things when you do it. I don't know if that answered your question. Did that make sense? Yeah. Okay, yeah, good. Thank you for the question. Oh,
hi.
in the
This
back,
will
yeah.
seem like a non-writing question. Like, I've just gotten too into your story now, and that's all I want to talk about.
That's fine.
And thinking about myself. But how did your she's,
No, stand up.
Stand up. I'm okay. I'll do it.
Or talk
Do you want me to
deeply.
sing?
Or you can sing deeply.
Hi, I'm from California, just flew in. But how did your relationship with stuff change as a result of losing all that stuff? And then kind of like, to make it more writery, kind of tying it into the quote at the end about Gandhi and sort of the trappings and the ideal situation if we're super successful writers, sort of, you know, bookending that.
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you. And I actually was just sharing it at my table. My husband is a bit of a collector. A collector. No, you said hoarder. I did not say hoarder. But you know what I'm talking about, girl. And I had been trying to get him to clean out the garage for a really long time before the flood. And I said, I'm from the islands, I'm from the Caribbean, I'll whip up some voodoo stuff if you don't do it. And then the storm came, and I went, told you. Yeah, so we literally, if it wasn't in a high cabinet and not made of not made of paper or fabric, we got rid of it because of mold, right? It was so we got rid of everything pretty much. I found that I am very careful about what I buy now, right? That I had sort of been in this sort of throwaway culture, and I'm like, oh, that's cute, I'll buy that, or that's, you know, kind of thing, and now I'm like, no, that's not necessary, right? I've fallen a little off the wagon 7 months later. Like, I'm noticing I'm kind of like I have to pull myself back. Before I was like, I don't need it, I don't need it, I don't need it. So how is it affected, to bring it back to writing? Yeah, we're being, and also we're in an apartment right now, right, as we rebuild, so we literally don't have the room to buy a lot of stuff, which is good. You know, I bought rugs. That's all I've done. I've bought a bunch of rugs, but it has slowed us down in what do we really want to buy, and what does what we buy say about us, especially when it comes to our house. Where I'm sort of thinking, like, what is the feeling that I want people to feel about us when they come into the house? What do you know? And I've really thought about this. Like you know, I'm from the Caribbean. My husband's English. My daughter's American. So we're a pretty international family. And I think, you know, that, and travel is big for us. And so I think, you know, I want people to come in, and I want it to feel global, and I want it to feel that no matter who you are when you come to our house, what your background, that we are going to honor that those differences you bring in. Like, that's a value for me. And how do I make that value, how do I make my house reflect that? So definitely I've become far more mindful about the things that I buy, for sure. There's no question. There's no question about that. And I wasn't a particularly, you know, I wasn't a person that spent a lot of money anyway, but I am very mindful of it. As far as my writing, you know, the whole experience, this experience of writing through it, like, I didn't realize how much I needed to write during it. and write publicly during it, which was interesting for me. Because my background, I mean, you heard Kathy, I'm an engineer and a lawyer, right? And so writing is something that I came to very late in life. And I realized I needed to do it because if I wrote about the good, I focused on the good. And if I did it publicly, then it made me want to make sure to focus on the good. And I think, I'm always amazed at sort of the power that the words had. And a lot of people, like I have a blog, and so a lot of people were leaving comments on the blog like, thank you for sharing this, because all we're seeing is aerial shots of, you know, the lake that is Houston. We don't really know what's happening on the ground, and I appreciate you stopping to share that. And I think that's a really powerful thing that we all have as writers, right? To share our truths. Because I don't think that we necessarily share the truth. I don't think it's possible because we all are doing it through a lens, our own lens. We try our best. But I think all those lenses, not to use a photography term, I just realized, you can take the camera out of the girl's hands, but I think those lenses are really important, and the myriad of the lenses are really important. And so I probably am more committed now to writing, just what my own perspective is, and using writing as a way to process what I go through. Do you all do that? I tend to write to process what I'm struggling with anyway, right? So just keep doing it. Did I answer your question? I felt like I rambled. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, one more? I've got one more question I can take, I'm being told. Right here up in front? Yeah?
Did you chop off his gaming fingers?
Oh, the question is, did Emily chop off Alex's gaming fingers? The article was unclear. Sorry. I did look, because I was wondering, but I did look. I have to think that he probably games with his dominant hand, and therefore was probably defending himself with his dominant hand, so probably yes. But that is speculation on my part. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for being so kind.
You're so funny. Oh. And we have for you a Liza Donnelly drawing for your very, very own to take home. Dear Liza, dear Liza. So now you can have some art in your home since you lost so many things.
Can I share what it says? So it's a picture of some kids in a sandbox, and it says, "I'm planning on making my parents miserable so my life is intolerable and I can become a writer." I love that. Thank you so much. I'm going to have it framed. It's going to be in our new home, for sure. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So terrific.
Thank you.
Welcome. You know, Karen asked us to change the world with humor and with writing, but I think we can honestly say, Karen, you changed our world this afternoon. And Karen will be at the signing table right after lunch. Thank you, everybody.